feel frustrated because poor Mossy is unable to convince Tweet to listen to his idea.
Welcome to the KidLit Deconstruction Zone podcast. In each episode, we'll mine children's books for tools to fill your author toolbox. Let's dig in.
Episode 5, Tools for Engaging Endings. In today's KidLit Deconstruction Zone podcast episode, we're chatting about engaging endings. And this is your spoiler alert, in case you want to read any of the books we mention in today's episode. A story's resolution is what happens after the big conflict is solved, whether the ending is a few lines long or a chapter. How the story wraps up matters. An ending that comes too easily seems like it comes out of nowhere, or might have too many unanswered questions, may leave readers unsatisfied. So, what makes an engaging ending work? Simple. The journey needs to feel earned. And if the ending is central to the main character's journey and makes the reader care, that quite simply is powerful storytelling. The tools. Let's dig into the tools you might include in your story to craft an impactful and engaging ending. Main character changes, leave clues as breadcrumbs, and evokes reader emotions. Our first tool is main character changes. Has your main character grown or changed throughout the story? Most stories include some kind of transformation, physical, mental, or emotional. These changes signal character growth. In stories where the main characters don't change, like Superman or Sherlock Holmes, the world around them should be a little different. Lastly, character change does not need to be big or flashy. In stories written for middle grade and teen readers, subtle changes say a lot. Here's your writing tip. Consider how much your main character changes and what their impact is on the world of the story.
Tool number 2, leaving clues as breadcrumbs. To develop an engaging ending, the writer should leave clues that lead up to the resolution and tie up loose ends. Breadcrumbs could be unique details about the main character, setting, or the overall story that adds layers of interest. It is your job as the author to weave those details throughout the journey, but also not leave the reader questioning why those elements mattered by the end. Hence, plot clues aid the story to be somewhat inevitable, but also surprising in how the elements are used to evoke an emotional ending. Here's your writing tip. Start with the end in mind by considering how your story clues will be used in your resolution.
Our last tool is evokes readers' emotions. When the reader reaches the conclusion of the story, the main character's journey has also come to an end. What is the final impression you've left the reader with? Have you given them an ending that evokes tears, smiles, or a gasp? You definitely don't want to leave them with a groan. A good ending should resolve the central conflict, leaving the reader with a satisfying and memorable experience. If the reader is left with the same emotions as your main character, you've hit the mark. Even better, if you've been able to weave in a surprising and unexpected twist. Here's your writing tip. What is your intended emotional takeaway? Inventory your story's emotional arc, its connection to the plot clues, and the main character's change to ensure that you've reached your desired emotional impact at the end.
The books.
Today's KDZ picture book pick is Lucky Duck by Greg Pizzoli. Lucky Duck is an interesting example of our first tool, main character change. Because not only does Susan the Duck experience an emotional change in the resolution, she also has shifting emotions that may be surprising to the reader throughout the story. For example, by the afternoon, Susan was feeling unlucky. She had lost her favorite marble, but then the wolf brought her carrots and she felt lucky again. Through a series of unlucky circumstances, Susan remains upbeat when she encounters the wolf. For the second tool, Lucky Duck leaves clues as breadcrumbs, with a collection of unrelated items like marbles and roller skates, and very unlucky scenarios like running out of pickles, which may not make sense to the reader at the time, but we accept it because it's part of Susan the Duck's story. Quote, Susan the Duck was feeling a bit unlucky. Darn! The roller skates she ordered online were 2 sizes too big. End quote. The illustration features an annoyed Susan with a no return policy on the floor. Why does a duck need skates? Well, the reader may be uncertain, but this breadcrumb will be answered in the resolution to make for an inevitable but surprising ending. For our last tool, evokes readers' emotions, Lucky Duck comes full circle by revisiting Susan the Duck's emotional state. By the end of Susan the Duck's journey, the reader has followed along on the emotional yet humorous ride. Quote, Susan looked around the table and smiled. She felt very, very lucky. End quote. The conflict has been resolved and all the plot clues have been addressed. So what is left? What the author intended all along. A lucky duck.
The KDZ podcast chapter book pick, Mossy and Tweed. Crazy for Coconuts by Merker Hakkanen. Mossy and Tweed are two forest elves whose friendship is put to the test when they try to crack open a mysterious coconut. Tweed is a great example of showing the main character change. In the beginning, he overthinks everything. Quote, "This is the new plan. Ta-da!" End quote. In the panel art, we see a very elaborate blueprint. Unfortunately, none of Tweed's plans work out, leaving him so frustrated that he tosses a rock. And that simple idea opens the coconut with a crack. For the second tool, leaving clues as breadcrumbs, we need to pay attention to Mossy. Quote, "Hey, look at this!" End quote. Mossy finds a tag with instructions to use a rock to open the coconut. He can't wait to share this clue with Tweed. The last tool evokes readers' emotions. We feel frustrated because poor Mossy is unable to convince Tweed to listen to his idea. Quote, "If we use the rock..." Shh, end quote. Tweed is too deep in thought, and he hushes his friend over and over. The panels continue that way until Mossy smacks his head in annoyance. Readers can relate to being in Mossy's tiny elvish shoes, and if you're an overplanner like me, you can relate to Tweed too. The KDZ podcast middle grade book pick is the graphic novel Don't Cause Trouble by Ari Chung. The main character, Ming Lee, wants to desperately fit in with the other sixth graders by getting new sneakers. And the opening perfectly sets up the tool main character changes. Quote, "On the first day of school, kids wear their brand new clothing and shoes. I just try to go unnoticed." End quote. We see in the panels that Ming's family shops in thrift stores. But later on, Ming's viewpoint on clothes change when he finds out that his friend uses thrifted clothes to design amazing outfits. Talk about positive peer influence. But that change doesn't solve Ming's other problem. How can he buy new shoes? The story uses visual and text clues as breadcrumbs. Ming has a literal light bulb moment. Quote, "Margie, would you like to make an order for egg rolls next week?" Throughout the story, Ming's mother's egg rolls are shown to be a yummy, in-demand hit with adults and kids alike in Ming's neighborhood. While there are a lot of humorous antics in Ming's story that definitely evoke readers' emotions, others tug at our heartstrings. Ming was caught stealing a designer shirt, and the reason is heartbreaking. Quote, "We don't have enough money." Yes, Ming wants new clothes and to fit in, but he's also old enough to understand that his family is struggling financially.
Our young adult book selection for this episode is Everything We Never Had, written by Randy Rebai. In Everything We Never Had, we're introduced to 4 generations of the Magobol family. The story begins in 1929 in California with 16-year-old Francisco, who has left everything behind in the Philippines to seek his fortune in a new country. We then move to his son Emil, and then down another generation to Chris, and finally to young Enzo. The setting changes from California to Denver, Colorado, and then to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Each generation faces the challenges that come with being an immigrant in this country, while also trying to overcome the patterns of intergenerational dysfunction that consume them. We see an example of tool number 1 in a turning point for Chris, where he develops pride in his heritage, which leads to an emotional shift and growth for him. I'll read from the text. Chris vows to never be a man like that, a father like that. If he ever has children, he will not force them to live some narrow life defined by narrow-minded ideas. He will make sure they know where they come from so that they can be whoever they are, so they can become whoever they want to become. This is where he starts to develop his own identity and gains a new understanding that separates him from his father's influence. Now, moving to tool number 2, leaving clues as breadcrumbs. We see signs in several parts of the book where the intergenerational cycle just might be about to be broken. Most of these examples fall with Enzo. He's key in trying to break the tension between his father and his grandfather. Enzo tries to make peace by joining his grandfather on evening walks, and then by getting his father to come as well. I'll read from the text. Night by night, block by block, story by story, grandfather and grandson finally get to know each other in a way that's eluded so many of the men of their blood. Our final tool evokes readers' emotion. By the time the story ends, although all the problems are not fixed, we can see an effort to make connections and relationships with more open communication and choosing healing over continued harm. Enzo is the emotional bridge that creates the opportunity for healing and moves the family in a more positive direction. His efforts affect Chris and move him to react to his father and to reach out. With each generation, the men in the family try to give their children everything they never had. But the most important thing was always missing. I'll read from the text. It's getting out of the way and allowing them the freedom to be that person. It's being proud, not when they fulfill your own expectations or conditions, but when they live in a way that aligns with who they are. That's the love I'm trying to give Enzo, at least. From this point, there's a move towards reconciliation and hope for new beginnings. This leaves the reader with a sense of hope for the family as well.
The homework. For today's homework, let's fine-tune your story's ending. Consider how the main character changes and the impact on other characters. Decide where you can strategically leave clues as breadcrumbs to support the story's resolution. Finally, put yourself in the reader's mindset. Objectively rate how they might feel after experiencing key emotional events throughout the story. And for extra credit, share your revised story with a writing partner and ask them if the new ending is more engaging. Whether you're writing a picture book, YA, or something in between, grab your writing tools and get to work.
If you have any book suggestions for us to deconstruct in future episodes, please leave a comment below. Thank you for listening to the KDZ podcast, and please remember to like, share, and subscribe.